The Black Hawk UH-60 sliced through the Montana night at 8,000 feet. Below, the wilderness sprawled like a frozen sea, endless peaks and valleys draped in snow that glowed pale under the quarter moon. The helicopter's rotors beat a steady rhythm against the thin mountain air. Inside the cabin, 5 figures sat in tactical silence, their faces hidden behind night vision goggles that gave them the appearance of insects from some mechanical future. Staff Sergeant Elena Blackwood sat near the open door, one hand gripping the overhead rail, the other resting on her M4 carbine. At 27, she carried herself with the lean efficiency of a wolf. 5'9", dark hair pulled tight beneath her helmet eyes that missed nothing. The cold wind whipped through the cabin, but she didn't flinch. She'd been cold before. She'd been colder. Across from her, Captain Wade Driscoll sprawled in his seat with the casual arrogance of a man who'd never truly been tested. 38 years old, Delta Force decorated. A soldier, or so his file claimed. But Elena had learned long ago that files only told half the story, sometimes less than half. 25 minutes into the flight, Wade stood. The movement was casual, just a man stretching his legs. But Elena's hand drifted toward her sidearm anyway. Some instinct, old and cold, whispered danger. Wade's team shifted. Small movements barely perceptible, creating angles, boxing her in. Then Wade's hand went to his knife. "You know what your problem is, Blackwood?" His voice came through the headset, conversational despite the rotor noise. "You're too damn good at your job." The blade caught the moonlight as he moved toward her. Not threatening, not yet, just there. 13 operations, Wade continued. 13 successful disruptions of weapons trafficking networks in 6 months. You've cost General Holloway's partners $68 million. That ends tonight. Elena's mind processed the words even as her body prepared for violence. The recording device hidden in her vest was capturing everything. If she survived, it would matter. If betrayal looks good on you, Wade, she said quietly. Goes with the smile. He moved fast. The knife flashed once, twice. Her harness straps parted like spider silk. Before Elena could react, hands grabbed her, rough, impersonal, efficient. 2 sets of hands. Professional soldiers doing professional work. Nothing personal, Wade said. Just business. They pushed. For one suspended moment, Elena hung in the doorway, balanced between the helicopter's warm interior and the infinite cold beyond. She saw Wade's face clearly in that instant. Saw the absence of remorse. Saw the calculation. Then gravity claimed her. She fell into darkness, and the Black Hawk's lights became distant stars, and the rotor noise faded to nothing. And there was only the wind and the night and the earth rushing up to meet her at 120 miles per hour. 96 hours earlier, the rain came down in sheets across Arlington National Cemetery. 12 years ago on a Tuesday morning that felt like the end of the world, 15-year-old Elena Blackwood stood before her father's grave and learned what forever meant. Master Sergeant Daniel Blackwood, born 1970, died 2012. Killed in action during a classified operation in the Persian Gulf. The details remain classified. They would stay classified. All Elena knew was that her father had gone to war and hadn't come home, and the flag they'd folded with such ceremony couldn't fill the hole he'd left behind. The other mourners had dispersed, leaving Elena alone with the rain and the rows of white headstones marching toward the horizon. But she wasn't entirely alone. Colonel Thaddeus Brennan stood 10 feet away, rain streaming off his dress uniform. 55 years old, built like a cedar post with iron gray hair and eyes the color of winter sky. He delivered the eulogy, brief, precise, heavy, with the weight of things left unsaid. Now he approached Elena with the careful movements of a man who understood grief. "Your father saved my life," he said without preamble. "Basra, 1991. Ambush. Danny took 2 rounds pulling me out of the kill zone. 16 years later, he was still the finest soldier I ever trained." Elena looked up at him. Rain mixed with tears on her face. "He talked about you, called you Iron Hawk." Something shifted in Brennan's expression. Not quite a smile. Old call sign from operations that officially never happened. "I want to be a ranger," Elena said. "Like him. The Army doesn't take women in the Rangers. Then I'll make them take me." Brennan studied her for a long moment. Saw the set of her jaw. Saw the steel in her eyes. Saw Danny Blackwood's daughter standing in the rain, refusing to break. When you're ready, he said, find me. 8 years passed. Elena found him at Fort Benning, Georgia in the spring of 2020. She was 22 years old and had spent those 8 years preparing. Olympic biathlon training, skiing and marksmanship, competitive climbing, wilderness survival courses. Everything she could do to build herself into something the Army couldn't refuse. Ranger School was 74 days of controlled suffering, sleep deprivation, caloric deprivation, physical demands that broke most candidates in the first 2 weeks. Of the 160 soldiers who started with Elena's class, only 43 would finish. She would be the only woman. Colonel Thaddeus Brennan, now 63 and technically semi-retired, had returned to Fort Benning specifically to train her. He didn't coddle, he didn't make allowances. He pushed her harder than anyone else, and when the male candidates complained about special treatment, he pushed her harder still. You want their respect, he told her during a night march through the Georgia swamps. Earn it, 10 times over, because that's what it takes when you're the first. The obstacle course record had stood for 7 years, 14 minutes, 32 seconds. Elena broke it by 45 seconds, moving through the mud and rope and walls with mechanical precision. The male candidates who'd been laying bets on her failure went quiet. The shooting qualification was perfect. 300 out of 300 possible points across M4 carbine sniper rifle and sidearm. The range master, a grizzled warrant officer who'd been skeptical of female rangers, simply nodded and marked her score without comment. The nod was worth more than words, but it was the survival exercise that truly tested her. Dropped in the North Georgia mountains with nothing but a knife and a canteen. 3 days, find your way back, make your own shelter, start your own fire. Candidates had died in this exercise before hypothermia falls simple bad luck. The instructors watched from a distance, but they wouldn't intervene unless death became imminent. On the second night, the temperature dropped to 28 degrees and rain fell in freezing curtains. Elena's hands shook so badly she couldn't grip the flint striker Brennan had taught her to carry. The other candidates dropped separately, were probably huddled in shelters conserving energy, playing it safe. Elena closed her eyes and thought back to a conversation from months earlier. They'd been in Brennan's office, a cramped space in the training building that smelled like old coffee and gun oil. Maps covered the walls, not modern maps, hand-drawn tactical charts from operations in Eastern Europe during the 1980s. Prague, East Berlin, places where Brennan had operated during the Cold War, back when covert meant something different than it did now. Modern Rangers rely on technology, Brennan had said, tapping a worn map of Czechoslovakia. GPS, night vision, satellite communications. Good tools. But tools break, batteries die, satellites go down. You know what doesn't fail? He tapped his temple. Your mind. He tapped his chest. Your will. Then he'd shown her things they didn't teach in modern Ranger School anymore. Old tradecraft, Cold War survival techniques developed when American operators had worked behind the Iron Curtain, where capture meant torture and death, where you couldn't call for extraction, where you survived on skill alone. Battery and steel wool, he'd said, demonstrating. Any battery, any steel wool, touch them together, you get a spark hot enough to light tinder. Low-tech, reliable. They can take your matches, your lighter, your fancy equipment. But if you've got a battery from a flashlight and steel wool from a cleaning kit, you've got fire. In the freezing Georgia rain, Elena opened her eyes. Her flashlight, standard issue, dying slowly over 2 days of night navigation, still had enough juice. Her cleaning kit regulation, Army issue, contained a small pad of steel wool. 5 minutes later, she had fire. She made it back to Fort Benning on the morning of the third day, walking into the rally point at 0600 sharp. Brennan was waiting. His face revealed nothing but his eyes. His eyes held something like pride. Cold War tricks still work, Elena said. Always will, Brennan replied, because they're not tricks, they're fundamentals. But the real test came during week 7. High-altitude parachute jump, 12,000 feet, part of the advanced training that separated Rangers from regular infantry. Elena had done static line jumps before, the kind where your chute deploys automatically. This was different. This was free fall followed by manual deployment. More danger, more room for error, more opportunity to prove herself. The jump started clean. Elena exited the aircraft at 12,000 feet, held position for the required freefall time, reached for her ripcord at 8,000 feet. The main parachute deployed, then immediately collapsed. Rigging malfunction. The kind that happened once in every few thousand jumps. The kind that killed soldiers when they panicked. Elena didn't panic. Brennan's voice echoed in her head. Altitude awareness, count in your head. You've got time until 4,000 feet. Below that, you've got problems. She was at 7,500 feet, falling at terminal velocity. She had approximately 40 seconds before the ground turned her into a memory. Cut away the main chute. The cutaway handles were right where they should be. Pull both simultaneously. The defective main chute separated, streaming away into the blue Georgia sky. 6,000 feet. Deploy reserve chute. The reserve ripcord was on her chest, one hard pull. The reserve chute billowed above her lines, singing taut harness, digging into her shoulders as her velocity dropped from deadly to merely dangerous. 4,000 feet. She was going to make it. 2,000 feet. The ground rushed up the Fort Benning drop zone marked with colored panels. Elena worked the steering toggles, lined up on the target area, and prepared for landing. The impact was hard, harder than it should have been. She hit the ground at an angle, tried to roll with it, felt something in her left shoulder give way with a nauseating pop, dislocated. The pain was immediate and comprehensive. She lay on the ground, breathing through it as the safety crew rushed over. Brennan arrived 30 seconds later. He'd been watching from the tower, had seen the whole thing. "Can you walk?" he asked. "Yes, sir." "Then get up." Elena got up, left arm hanging useless at her side, shoulder screaming. She met Brennan's eyes. "That's a dislocated shoulder," he said. "Medics need to look at it." "After the debrief, sir." Something that might have been approval crossed his face. "After the debrief." Later in the medical tent, as they reduced her shoulder, pushing the joint back into place with the kind of pain that made grown men scream, Brennan stood beside her. "Remember this feeling," he said quietly. "Someday you might fall without a reserve chute. Someday all you'll have is training and will. When that comes, remember it's not the speed that kills you. It's the angle. Control the angle, control your fate." Lena gritted her teeth through the pain and nodded. That moment, more than any other, defined what would come. Present-day Forward Operating Base, Glacier, Montana. 4 years later, Staff Sergeant Elena Blackwood had become exactly what she'd promised to become. The best. Forward Operating Base Glacier sat in the shadow of the Rocky Mountains 100 miles from the Canadian border. It was a small facility, 200 personnel, mostly support staff for operations in the vast wilderness region where 3 states met and law enforcement presence was thin. Perfect country for smuggling. Perfect country for operations that needed to stay quiet. Elena's track record spoke for itself. 13 missions. 13 successes. She'd dismantled weapons trafficking networks that had operated for decades. She'd recovered Soviet-era arms that had flooded into the region after the Cold War ended, AK-47s, Makarov pistols, RPG-7s, enough firepower to start a small war. The smugglers called her the Reaper. She'd learned to take it as a compliment. The briefing room hummed with the low conversation of soldiers preparing for operations. Fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows. Maps covered the walls, topographical surveys of the Montana wilderness, satellite imagery of suspected weapons caches, intelligence reports on known traffickers. Captain Wade Driscoll lounged against the back wall surrounded by his Delta Force team. 4 operators, all with the hard-eyed look of men who'd seen combat and liked it. Delta considered themselves the elite of the elite. Rangers were good, they'd acknowledged, but Delta was better. Lieutenant Wyatt Mercer, the youngest of Wade's team at 25, sat apart from the others. He had a baby face that made him look even younger, but his file listed deployments to Iraq and Syria. Combat experience. The real thing. Commander Patterson stood at the front of the room, a tactical display glowing blue behind him. 58 years old, career military, the kind of officer who'd come up through the ranks before desk work claimed him. "Settle down," Patterson said. The room quieted. "Target is an abandoned Cold War missile silo designated Site 7, 175 miles north-northeast. Intelligence indicates it's being used as a weapons cache. Soviet-era arms, possibly including man-portable air defense systems. Manpads, missiles that could bring down civilian aircraft. The kind of hardware that couldn't be allowed to reach domestic militia groups. Staff Sergeant Blackwood will lead the operation," Patterson continued. "Her team will, His secure phone buzzed. He glanced at it, frowned. Hold one, Rashawn. Patterson stepped out. The room waited. Wade Driscoll's smirk grew wider. Elena felt the tension in the air shift, something wrong, something moving beneath the surface. Patterson returned 2 minutes later. His expression had changed. Revised orders, he said. Delta Force will take tactical lead. Captain Driscoll, it's your operation. Staff Sergeant Blackwood, you'll accompany as observer and technical advisor. The room went silent. Elena kept her face neutral, but her mind raced. 13 successful operations. 13 times she'd been given mission command. And now suddenly she was being sidelined for an operation in her own operational area. Sir, she said carefully, may I ask why the change? Patterson's jaw tightened. Orders from higher up the chain. Delta needs the operational experience in this terrain. You'll provide local knowledge and support. It was bullshit, and everyone in the room knew it. But orders were orders. Wade pushed off from the wall. Don't worry, Blackwood. We'll try not to mess up your perfect record. The contempt in his voice was subtle, just subtle enough to avoid being insubordination, just obvious enough to make his point. Elena met his eyes. I'm sure you'll do your best, Pim. The briefing continued. Target details, approach routes, contingencies. Elena absorbed it all, making mental notes, mapping the operation in her head. Something was wrong. Something beyond standard inter-service rivalry. She'd learned to trust her instincts, and her instincts were screaming. After the briefing, she made a call. The secure line rang 3 times before Colonel Thaddeus Brennan answered. He was 7,700 miles away, theoretically retired, living in the North Carolina mountains. But retirement had never really taken with Brennan. He consulted, he advised, he kept his finger on the pulse of the military he'd served for 40 years. This had better be important, Reaper, his voice came through, gravelly, impatient. The voice of a man who'd been woken from sleep but wouldn't admit it. Hawk, I've got a problem. The nickname felt right, had always felt right. He was Iron Hawk from his Cold War call sign. She was Reaper from the designation the smugglers had given her. Names that meant something beyond rank and file. Talk to me. Elena gave him the situation in brief, efficient sentences. The mission change, Bashun. Wade Driscoll taking command. The sudden demotion to observer status. Brennan was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice had changed, harder, colder. Wade Driscoll, I know that name. Fallujah 2006. He was leading a Delta team on a weapons cache raid. 3 Rangers went with them as local support. All 3 Rangers died. Officially enemy action. Unofficially, questions were asked. The weapons cache they'd come to secure disappeared. $12 million worth of Iraqi military hardware. Investigation went nowhere. Driscoll was cleared. You think he's dirty? I think wolves don't change their nature just because they change uniforms. Watch your 6th Reaper. If he moves on you, you put him down. No hesitation. You understand, understood. And Reaper, keep your recorder on. Whatever happens, make sure there's evidence. The line went dead. Elena sat in her quarters staring at the tactical vest hanging on the wall. Specialist Jackson Rivers, the unit's communications technician, had modified it for her 6 months ago. Built-in voice recorder, emergency beacon broadcasting on an old Cold War frequency 14.233 min that modern military systems ignored, but that Brennan still monitored with vintage equipment. Just in case, Rivers had said, because sometimes the chain of command isn't as trustworthy as we'd like. Elena had thanked him and filed the vest away. Now she took it down and checked the recorder. Fully functional, beacon operational. Just in case. The tarmac thrummed with activity as the Black Hawk prepared for departure. The sun had set hours ago. The mission was scheduled for night insertion, harder to see, harder to be seen. The cold bit through Elena's tactical gear, despite the layers. Montana Winter didn't care about operational readiness. Wade's Delta team loaded their equipment with practiced efficiency. Night vision gear, suppressed weapons, tactical radios. The tools of modern warfare. Elena watched them work and saw the subtle glances they exchanged. Saw the way they positioned themselves around her. Saw the box forming. Lieutenant Mercer caught her eye. He looked uncomfortable, uncertain, but he said nothing. Elena did her own pre-flight check, M4 carbine, 3 extra magazines. Sidearm a Sig Sauer P320, her preferred weapon. Tactical knife. Medical kit. The recorder in her vest switched on, the beacon ready to activate with a single switch. She was supposed to be an observer. Observers didn't need full combat loads, but Elena had learned long ago that regulations and reality often diverged. At 2300 hours, the Black Hawk lifted off. The rotors beat the cold air into submission. The ground fell away. The lights of the base became distant stars, and then they were over wilderness, endless miles of mountain and forest, where civilization was a memory and the only law was survival. Elena sat near the open door, one hand on the overhead rail. Through her night vision goggles, the world was rendered in shades of green, the helicopter's interior, the mountain peaks below the stars above. Wade sat across from her, face hidden behind his own goggles, posture relaxed. 25 minutes into the flight, he stood. The movement seemed casual, just a man stretching. But Elena's hand drifted toward her sidearm. Old instincts, cold certainties. Wade moved closer. His team shifted, creating angles. "You know what your problem is, Blackwood." His voice came through the headset, conversational, almost friendly. Elena said nothing. Waited. "You're too damn good at your, His hand went to his knife. The blade emerged, tactical, black, meant for cutting anything from paracord to flesh. 13 operations. You've disrupted 13 major trafficking networks in 6 months. You've cost General Holloway's partners $68 million. You've made yourself a problem that needs solving." The words hung in the cold air. Elena's recorder captured every syllable. "General Holloway." Elena kept her voice steady. "You're working for a general." "Working with," Wade corrected. "Partnership, really. Controlled weapons flow, permanent military funding, defense contracts worth billions. You kept getting in the way. So you throw me out of a helicopter. So we solve a problem." The knife moved. Fast, professional. Her harness straps parted like thread. Nothing personal, just business. Hands grabbed her, rough, impersonal, strong. Delta Force operators, men trained to kill efficiently. They lifted. They pushed. For one suspended moment, Elena hung in the doorway. Saw Wade's face clearly. Saw the absence of conscience. "Equipment malfunction," Wade said. "Tragic accident. Full military honors." Then they pushed and Elena fell into the night. 8,000 feet of empty air. Terminal velocity. The wind tearing at her gear. The earth below waiting. Brennan's voice echoed in her head. "Control the angle. Control your fate." Elena spread her arms and legs. Maximum drag. The tactical vest, Brennan's modified design with extra material under the arms, caught air like a primitive wing. Not a true wingsuit, but enough. Her velocity dropped from 120 miles per hour to 95. Through her night vision, she spotted what she needed: a dense patch of forest on a steep slope, snow visible on the upper sections. The physics lined up. Barely possible. Almost certainly fatal. But almost wasn't the same as certainly. Elena angled her body using the vest's aerodynamic properties to glide toward the trees. Every second brought her closer to the ground. Every second gave her one more chance to live. The trees rushed up. Elena tucked her arms, making herself small to penetrate the canopy, then immediately spread wide again as she hit the first branches. The impact was catastrophic. Branches snapped against her body, each one stealing kinetic energy, slowing her fall. Her left collarbone broke with a sound like a gunshot. Ribs cracked, 3 of them, sharp pains in her right side. Her left knee twisted, ligaments tearing. But she was slowing. The vest protected her vital organs. Each broken branch bought her another fraction of survivability. The final impact came at the snow-covered slope, 45 degrees of angle. Elena hit and immediately tumbled the slope, transforming her vertical velocity into horizontal momentum. She rolled, tumbled, slid 300 yards down the mountainside. She came to rest in a deep snowdrift beneath a rocky outcropping. For a long moment, she didn't move, couldn't move, could barely breathe. Then slowly, painfully, she took inventory. Left collarbone broken, 3 ribs cracked, left knee ACL torn, severe lacerations across her arms and face. Probable concussion from the battering through the trees, but she was alive. Elena fumbled for the beacon with her working hand, found the switch, activated it, One brief pulse, 2 seconds of signal on 14.233 megahertz. Brennan would be listening. He'd hear it. He'd know. The wind howled across the mountains. The temperature was dropping. Exposure would kill her as surely as the fall should have. But Elena Blackwood was her father's daughter. She was Colonel Brennan's student. She was a ranger. And rangers didn't quit. She forced herself to sit up, forced herself to assess, forced herself to survive. Above the Blackhawks lights had already disappeared. Wade and his team would be radioing in the equipment malfunction, the tragic accident. They'd mark her as killed in action and move on with their mission. They had no idea what they just unleashed. Elena Blackwood had fallen 8,000 feet and lived. Now she was going to make sure everyone knew exactly what that meant. Starting with Wade Driscoll, starting with General Holloway, starting now. The pain was a living thing. It wrapped around Elena's chest with every breath, sharp and insistent. Her left collarbone ground against itself with each movement. The torn ligaments in her knee sent lightning bolts up her leg. The cold seeped through her tactical gear, promising hypothermia if she didn't move soon. Elena lay in the snowdrift for exactly 90 seconds, long enough to confirm she could still feel all her extremities, long enough to accept that she'd survived something that should have killed her, not long enough for shock to set in. 90 seconds. Then she forced herself to sit up. The world tilted. Concussion. She blinked hard, willing her vision to stabilize. Through the gaps in the trees above, she could see stars. The Big Dipper. Polaris. Navigation markers as old as human exploration. Brennan had drilled them into her until she could find north with her eyes closed. North wouldn't help her. She needed east. Elena pulled the tactical compass from her vest pocket. Her right hand still worked. Small mercy. The compass needle swung steadied. She oriented herself, calculated distance and terrain from memory. Dutch Morrison's homestead lay 14 miles east and northeast. A mountain man Brennan had known since the Gulf War. A place where questions wouldn't be asked and help would be given. 14 miles. With a broken collarbone, cracked ribs, and a torn ACL, it might as well have been 1,400. But the alternative was freezing to death in a snowdrift while Wade Driscoll flew back to base to file false reports. Elena chose the harder path. She always had. First, she needed to stabilize her injuries. Brennan's Cold War field medicine techniques came back to her lessons taught in that cramped office at Fort Benning, demonstrations performed with the precise movements of a man who treated his own wounds behind enemy lines. Modern military medicine assumes you'll have a medic nearby, he'd told her. During covert operations in Eastern Europe, we didn't have that luxury. You learned to treat yourself or you died. Elena used her tactical knife to cut strips from her undershirt, fashioned a makeshift sling for her left arm, immobilizing the broken collarbone. The pain when she moved the arm into position made her vision gray at the edges, but she pushed through it. Pain was information. Information could be managed. The ribs were trickier. She couldn't splint them, couldn't do much except wrap them tight and hope nothing had punctured a lung. She used more cloth strips binding her torso as firmly as she could with one hand. Each wrap compressed the broken bones. Each wrap hurt. Each wrap bought her more mobility. The knee required snow. She packed it around the joint, numbing the torn ligaments. Korean War technique, Brennan had said. The men who'd fought at Chosin Reservoir had learned that extreme cold could be medicine as much as enemy. It reduced swelling. It dulled pain. It kept you moving when movement meant survival. Her medical kit contained military-grade painkillers. She dry-swallowed 2 pills knowing they'd give her about 6 hours of functionality before the pain broke through again. 6 hours to cover 14 miles of mountain terrain in darkness with critical injuries. It would have to be enough. Elena used a fallen branch as a crutch, testing her weight on it. The wood held. Good. She took one step, then another. Each movement was agony, but movement was life. Stillness was death. She activated the emergency beacon one more time, a 2-second pulse. Brennan would be listening. He'd know she was alive. He'd know she was moving. Beyond that, she was on her own. The forest closed around her as she limped into the darkness. 14 miles, one step at a time. The mountains didn't care about her pain. They never had. 175 miles south in the Blackhawk that had become Elena's attempted tomb, Wade Driscoll keyed his secure radio. Base, this is Raven 6. We have a situation. The response came immediately. Raven 6 base, go ahead. Equipment malfunction during approach to target. Staff Sergeant Blackwood's safety harness failed. She fell from the aircraft at altitude, no possibility of survival. Static filled the line for a moment, then confirmed status. Killed in action. Equipment failure. We're continuing to target. Understood, Raven 6. Condolences to her family. Complete your mission. Wade switched off the radio and looked at his team. Lieutenant Wyatt Mercer sat rigid in his seat, face pale behind his night vision goggles. The kid had barely spoken since they'd pushed Blackwood out. Good. Silence was compliance. Problem, Lieutenant? Wade asked. Mercer's jaw worked. Finally, no, sir. Good. Because we're all in this now, all of us. Remember that. The other 3 Delta operators nodded. They understood. They'd been paid to understand. $175,000 each. Money that would never appear on any official books. Money that bought silence and cooperation. Only Mercer still looked uncertain. Wade made a mental note. The kid might become a problem. Problems could be solved. The Black Hawk continued north toward the abandoned missile silo, toward the weapons cache that was worth millions to General Holloway's network, toward the operation that Blackwood would have disrupted if she'd been allowed to live. Wade allowed himself a small smile. The Reaper was dead. Long live the new order. Behind him, unnoticed, Mercer pulled out his phone, took a photo of Wade's tactical knife still sheathed but with fabric fibers visible on the blade. Evidence of cut straps. Evidence of murder. Mercer didn't know what he'd do with the photo yet, but he knew he couldn't unhear what he'd heard, couldn't unsee what he'd seen. His oath had been to the Constitution, to the Army, to something greater than money. He'd broken that oath tonight. He didn't know if he could fix it, but maybe he could try. 8 hours of walking through frozen hell taught Elena things about herself she'd never wanted to know. She learned that the human body could function past the point where it should shut down. That willpower could override pain signals screaming for rest. That each step forward was a victory, even when victory looked like a stumbling crawl through snow that came up to her knees. She learned that her father's voice still lived in her head, remembered things he'd said during their 2 brief years together. Blackwoods don't quit, Elena. We might fail, we might fall, but we don't quit. She learned that Brennan's training had been more than physical. It had been psychological, spiritual almost. He'd taught her that survival was a choice you made over and over, second by second, step by step. Dawn came slowly to the mountains. Gray light filtered through the pines, revealing a landscape of impossible beauty and absolute indifference. Elena had covered roughly 8 miles. Halfway. Her painkiller window was closing. The pills were wearing off, and the full weight of her injuries was returning. She pushed on. The sun was fully up when she saw smoke, a thin column rising from a valley ahead. Wood smoke, the kind that came from a fireplace. Civilization. Help. Hope. Elena's vision blurred. She blinked hard, forcing focus. Half a mile. She could cover half a mile. She had to. The homestead materialized through the trees like something from a fever dream. Log cabin, solar panels, satellite dish. A place built for self-sufficiency for people who wanted distance from the world. Dutch Morrison's place, exactly where it should be. Elena stumbled the last 100 yards, fell twice, got up both times, reached the front door and raised her fist to knock. The door opened before she could. The man who stood there was 76 years old and looked like he'd been carved from the mountains themselves. Dutch Morrison, 6 feet tall despite age's compression. White beard, eyes the color of glacier ice. His left hand was missing the wrist, ended in a scarred stump that he made no effort to hide. Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, Dutch said. You're Ironhawk's girl. Elena tried to speak, managed only help. Then the world tilted sideways and Dutch caught her before she hit the ground. The cabin's interior smelled like pine and coffee and something medicinal Elena couldn't identify. She came back to consciousness slowly, awareness returning in layers. Pain first, always pain, but duller, now manageable. Someone had given her something stronger than the military painkillers. Warmth second, a fire crackling in a stone fireplace, blankets piled over her. The bone-deep cold receding gradually. Voices third, Dutch's baritone rumble and a woman's softer tones. Sarah Morrison, Dutch's wife. Elena remembered Brennan mentioning her. Former Army nurse. Vietnam era. The kind of woman who'd seen everything and couldn't be shocked by anything. Elena opened her eyes. She lay on a cot near the fireplace. Her tactical gear was gone, replaced by clean thermals. Bandages covered her arms. Her left arm was properly splinted now, the broken collarbone immobilized with medical precision. Her ribs were wrapped professionally. Her knee was elevated and iced. Sarah Morrison sat in a chair beside the cot. 72 years old, silver hair pulled back, steady hands working on a bandage. She noticed Elena's eyes open. "Welcome back, Sergeant. You've had a rough night." Elena's throat was dry. Water. Sarah held a cup to her lips. Elena drank. The water tasted like the best thing she'd ever consumed. "Your injuries," Sarah said. "Broken collarbone, 3 cracked ribs, torn ACL, severe lacerations, probable concussion. You should be in a hospital." "Can't go to a hospital." "Dutch said you'd say that. He also said Thaddeus trained you. That true?" "Yes, ma'am," Sarah nodded. "Then you're tougher than you look. Thaddeus doesn't train quitters." Dutch entered from another room carrying a device Elena recognized immediately. An antique radio set, Korean War vintage, vacuum tubes instead of transistors. The kind of equipment that modern military communication systems would ignore as obsolete. "Found this in the attic," Dutch said. "Hasn't been turned on in 20 years, but the tubes are good. Your mentor's still monitoring the old frequencies." 14.233 MHz, Elena said. "Cold War emergency band." "That's what I figured." Dutch set up the radio on a table near the cot. "Thaddeus told me years ago if you ever showed up here, broken meant something bad had happened. Military bad. The kind where you can't trust official channels." Elena told them. "Not everything, not yet, but enough. The betrayal, the fall, Wade Driscoll, General Holloway. The recorded confession in her vest that Sarah had carefully preserved." Dutch's face went hard. Sarah's hands stilled on her bandages. "Treason," Dutch said quietly. "In my war, we shot traitors." "In all our wars," Sarah added. "The oath means something, or it should." Dutch powered up the radio. The tubes glowed orange as they warmed. Static crackled through the speaker. He tuned to 14.233 MHz and handed Elena the microphone. "Your show, Sergeant. Make the call." Elena keyed the mic. Her voice was steady despite everything evening. "Phoenix to Ironhawk. Phoenix to Ironhawk. Authentication code Sierra Tango 7903. I am compromised but alive. Repeat, compromised but alive." She released the key. Waited. Static filled the cabin. Then miraculously, Brennan's voice emerged from the ancient radio. "Phoenix, this is Ironhawk Actual. Authentication confirmed. Give me sitrep." Relief flooded through Elena so powerfully it made her dizzy. "Ironhawk Phoenix, I fell from 8,000 feet. Survived using Cold War descent techniques. Currently at Morrison Homestead with critical but stable injuries. Hostiles believe I'm KA. Injuries: broken collarbone, cracked ribs, torn ACL. Functional with assistance." A pause. When Brennan spoke again, his voice carried weight. "You fell 8,000 feet and walked 14 miles. Jesus Christ, Reaper. You trained me for it." "That I did." Evidence: recorded confession. Captain Wade Driscoll admitted conspiracy with General Marcus Holloway. Weapons trafficking network worth millions. They threw me out to eliminate the problem. I'm mobilizing now. Old guard assets. Extraction in 18 hours. Can you hold position? Elena looked at Dutch and Sarah. Dutch nodded firmly. Affirmative. Position secure. Be advised, hostiles have air assets and will search when they realize nobody was recovered. Understood. Stay dark. Stay alive. Ironhawk out. The radio fell silent. Dutch powered down the equipment. 18 hours. We can hold that long. I've got weapons. I've got defensible terrain. And I've got 60 years of being stubborn. Sarah stood. I'll make food. You need calories to heal. And we need to plan. The food was simple but perfect. Venison stew, bread, coffee strong enough to strip paint. Elena ate slowly, feeling strength return to her body. The stronger painkillers Sarah had given her were doing their work. The pain was still there, but manageable. Distant. Between bites, she outlined the tactical situation. Wade's Delta team, General Holloway's network, Garrett Kane, the smuggler who ran the local trafficking operations, the weapons cache that was the supposed target of tonight's mission. Kane, Dutch said, I know that name. Saw him in town last month. Big man. Moves like military. Carries himself wrong for a civilian. Ex-Ranger, Elena said. Dishonorably discharged from Gulf War. Brennan mentioned him. Sold captured weapons, got caught, got kicked out. Built a smuggling empire afterward. Men like that hold grudges, Sarah observed, against the system that expelled them. Against anyone who represents that system. Which means he'll help Wade hunt me. Probably, but maybe not. Sarah refilled Elena's coffee cup. In Vietnam, I saw a lot of men who went bad. Some were just bad, but some had codes. Twisted codes maybe, but codes. They'd steal but wouldn't murder. They'd break laws but not oaths. Kane might be the second type. That's a big maybe to bet my life on. You've already bet your life on bigger maybes, like falling 8,000 feet. Elena couldn't argue with that. The afternoon passed slowly. Elena rested, letting her body begin the healing process. Dutch brought out weapons hunting rifles, a Vietnam-era M14 shotguns. He cleaned them methodically, the movements of a man who'd done this 10,000 times. Sarah prepared supplies, extra bandages, antibiotics, pain medication, everything they'd need if the situation deteriorated. Elena studied maps of the region, memorized terrain features, planned escape routes despite her injuries. Brennan's voice in her head, hope for the best, plan for the worst, be ready for anything. Night fell, the temperature dropped. Dutch's grandchildren, teenagers who lived nearby, arrived with supplies and nervous energy. Dutch gave them instructions for creating false trails, thermal decoys, misdirection techniques from guerrilla warfare. You think they'll come? One of the teenagers asked. I think we should be ready if they do, Dutch replied. Around 11 p.m. they heard it, the distant thump of helicopter rotors. Elena moved to the window despite her injuries. Through the darkness, she could see searchlights sweeping the mountains. Thermal imaging. They were looking for her body. When they didn't find it, they'd expand the search. The helicopter made 3 passes over the valley. Each time it came closer. On the third pass, it hovered less than 200 yards from the cabin. The searchlights swept across the homestead. Lingered. Elena gripped the M14 Dutch had given her. If they came, she'd fight. Broken body or not. She'd fought her way out of worse situations. She'd fight her way out of this one. The helicopter pulled away, continued its search pattern toward the eastern ridges. Close, Dutch muttered. Too close. They didn't land, Sarah said. That means they're not sure. Still searching, still guessing. Elena lowered the rifle. Her hands were shaking not from fear, but from adrenaline and pain medication, and the simple fact that her body had been through trauma it shouldn't have survived. Get some rest, Sarah told her. You'll need strength for tomorrow. But Elena couldn't rest. Not yet. Something nagged at her. The helicopter had come close but hadn't committed. As if the pilot or the tactical commander had second thoughts. As if someone had deliberately misdirected the search. She was still thinking about it when she heard the knock on the door. 3 sharp raps. Deliberate. Not the knock of someone trying to be quiet. The knock of someone announcing their presence. Dutch grabbed a shotgun. Sarah moved toward the back room. Elena stood despite the pain. Despite Sarah's protest and positioned herself with a sight line to the door. Dutch opened it. The man who stood on the porch was 52 years old and looked like trouble. 6'2", built like a heavyweight boxer, gone slightly to seed. Gray in his hair, but none in his eyes. Those eyes swept the cabin interior, took in Elena's defensive position, and showed no surprise. Dutch Morrison, the man said. Been a long time. Garrett Kane. Dutch didn't lower the shotgun. You've got 10 seconds to explain why I shouldn't shoot you. Kane raised his hand slowly, non-threatening, but his posture suggested he could turn threatening in a heartbeat if needed. I'm not here to fight. I'm here to talk. To her. He nodded toward Elena. Staff Sergeant Elena Blackwood, the Reaper, the woman who survived an 8,000-foot drop tonight. Elena kept her rifle trained on him. How did you know I survived? Because I was in the helicopter that just flew over. I told Wade Driscoll you went into the eastern ridges, sent him on a wild goose chase. You've got about 4 hours before he figures out I lied. Why would you do that? Kane's expression shifted. Something that might have been respect crossed his features. Can I come in? I'd rather not have this conversation on the porch. Dutch looked at Elena, her call. She studied Kane for a long moment, saw the military bearing Sarah had mentioned. Saw something else too, calculation but not malice. Assessment but not threat. He's armed, Elena said. Of course I'm armed. You think I walk these mountains without protection? Kane slowly pulled back his jacket, revealing a Sig Sauer on his hip. But I'm not here to use it. If I wanted you dead, I'd have told Wade exactly where you were. Elena nodded to Dutch. Let him in, but if he moves wrong, shoot him. My pleasure, Dutch said. Kane entered. Dutch closed the door. Sarah emerged from the back room with her own rifle. Kane was boxed in by 3 armed people, one of them critically injured but still dangerous. He seemed almost amused by the situation. Coffee, Sarah asked. That'd be nice, ma'am. They sat, Kane on one side of the room, Elena and Dutch on the other. Sarah poured coffee but kept her rifle close. The cabin was tense with possibility violence or cooperation, both options still on the table. Talk, Elena said. You've got 5 minutes. Kane sipped his coffee. I served with Thaddeus Brennan in the Gulf War. Different units, but we crossed paths. Operation Desert Storm, the ground campaign. Brennan saved my life twice. Basra and Kuwait City. I owed him. You also got dishonorably discharged for stealing weapons. I did. Sold captured Iraqi hardware. Got caught, got kicked out, built what I have now from nothing. I'm not proud of it, but I'm not ashamed either. It's survival. Survival by arming criminals. Kane's face hardened. I arm resistance groups, militias who feel abandoned by their government. I don't sell to cartels. I don't sell to terrorists. I have rules. I have codes. Twisted maybe, but codes. And tonight I got hired by Wade Driscoll to track you. He told me you were KIA from an equipment malfunction. But I know bullshit when I hear it. I know Brennan trained you. I know your track record. And I know Wade Driscoll is the kind of man who'd throw someone out of a helicopter for money. So you lied to him. I did, because there's a difference between smuggling weapons and murdering fellow soldiers. That line exists even in my business. Wade crossed it. I won't help him. Elena studied him, trying to decide if this was truth or elaborate deception. What do you want? To warn you, Wade knows the official extraction point was compromised. I fed him that much truth to keep his trust. He's planning an ambush there. If Brennan's team shows up at the coordinates, Wade expects they'll walk into a kill zone. Kane pulled out a map, marked it with a pen. This is where Wade thinks you'll extract. Here, old logging road, good helicopter, access. This, he marked another spot, is a better location. Harder approach, but defensible. Wade won't anticipate it. Why tell me this? Because I owe Brennan. Because you're a warrior and deserve a warrior's chance. And because Wade's boss, General Holloway, represents everything wrong with the system I used to serve, he's using military resources for profit. That's not survival, that's corruption. Kane stood, slowly, keeping his hands visible. 4 hours, maybe less, before Wade figures out my misdirection. Use that time, coordinate with Brennan, change the extraction point, and Staff Sergeant, he met her eyes. What you did tonight, surviving that fall, that's the kind of thing legends are made of. Don't waste it by walking into an ambush. He moved toward the door. Dutch tracked him with the shotgun. At the threshold, Kane paused. Your father, Daniel Blackwood. I knew him too. Gulf War. Good man. Honorable. You're like him. Warriors recognize warriors. That's why I'm here. Then he was gone, disappearing into the mountain darkness. Elena sat in silence for a long moment, processing, calculating. Do you believe him? Sarah asked. I don't know, but I can verify his intel. If Brennan's approach matches what Kane described, we adjust. If it doesn't, we know Kane was lying. Dutch nodded. Smart. Trust but verify. That's good tactics. Elena looked at the map Kane had marked. The alternate extraction point made tactical sense. Better terrain, multiple escape routes. But it also could be a trap within a trap. She thought about her father, about Brennan, about the oath she'd taken, about falling 8,000 feet and choosing to survive. I need to contact Ironhawk again, she said. Tell him about the new coordinates, about Kane, about all of it. It's your call, Dutch said. You're the soldier here. We're just support. Elena smiled despite the pain. You held the line at Chosen Reservoir. You're not just support, you're the old guard. Old guard, Dutch repeated. He liked the sound of it. All right then, let's do this the old way. The right way. They powered up the radio again. Elena made the call. Briefed Brennan on everything Kane's visit, the warning, the alternate coordinates. Brennan was silent for a long moment after she finished. Then, Kane, I remember him. Good soldier before he went bad. If he's helping now, it's because his code demands it. Use his intel, but prepare for betrayal. Double-check everything. Understood. 18 hours is now 16 hours. We're moving faster than planned. Can you prepare defensive positions at the new extraction point? Elena looked at her injuries, looked at Dutch and Sarah, thought about what was possible versus what was necessary. Affirmative. We'll be ready. Then get ready, Reaper. Tomorrow we finish this. Ironhawk out. The radio fell silent again. Elena stood slowly. Her body protested. She ignored it. Dutch, I need to see that alternate extraction point. Need to walk the ground. You can barely walk at all. Then I'll crawl, but I need to see it. Need to know the terrain. Because if Kane's right, that's where we make our stand. And if he's wrong, that's where we spring our own trap. Sarah handed her more painkillers. You're as stubborn as Thaddeus said you'd be. Is that a compliment? From him, it was the highest praise. Elena took the pills, checked her weapons, tested her mobility. The pain was there, constant and demanding. But pain was just information. And the information told her she could still function, could still fight, could still win. She'd fallen 8,000 feet and survived. Whatever came next, she'd survive that too. The old ways, the hard ways, the ways that never failed. Brennan had taught her well. Now she'd prove it. Again and again. Until the job was done and the traitors were dead or in chains. The night was young. The mission was far from over. But Elena Blackwood was still alive, still armed, and still dangerous. Wade Driscoll had made a terrible mistake. He just didn't know it yet. Dawn came cold and clear to the Montana wilderness. Elena stood at the alternate extraction point, surveying terrain she'd walked in darkness just hours before. Her body was a catalog of injuries: broken collarbone, 3 cracked ribs, torn ACL lacerations that pulled with every movement. The painkillers dulled the edges but couldn't eliminate the constant throb of damaged tissue demanding rest. Rest would come later, after the mission, after justice. The location Garrett Kane had marked sat in a natural bowl surrounded by ridgelines. Defensible, multiple escape routes, good sight lines for overwatch positions. Either Kane had given them a tactical advantage or he'd marked the perfect kill zone. In 6 hours, they'd discover which. Dutch Morrison moved through the tree line with surprising grace for a 76-year-old man missing his left hand. He positioned himself behind a fallen log that offered both cover and a clear field of fire toward the southern approach. His hunting rifle, a .308, that had dropped elk at 400 yards, rested easy in his grip. Korean War taught me something the young soldiers forget, Dutch said, his voice carrying the gravel of age and cigarettes he'd quit 30 years too late. Chosen Reservoir, we were surrounded by 10 Chinese divisions, outnumbered 20 to 1, temperature 40 below zero. We held because we understood terrain better than the enemy did, made the ground work for us instead of against us. Elena nodded, checking her M4 carbine for the 3rd time. Muscle memory, ranger discipline. That's the plan. We know this land. Wade doesn't. Sarah Morrison was establishing a secondary position to the east. 72-year-old former Army nurse who treated wounds in Vietnam field hospitals when they came under fire. She handled the shotgun Dutch had given her with comfortable familiarity. Some skills oxidized with time. Others became permanent. The radio clipped to Elena's vest crackled. Colonel Thaddeus Brennan's voice came through steady and calm, as if he were discussing weather instead of a tactical extraction from hostile territory. Phoenix Ironhawk, 30 minutes out, status. Elena Keeter Mike. Ironhawk Phoenix, defensive positions established. 3 shooters plus 1 wounded but functional. No sign of hostiles yet. Roger that. Old guard is coming home. Out. Elena allowed herself a moment of relief. Brennan was coming. The man who'd trained her father. The man who'd trained her. The legend who'd operated behind the Iron Curtain during the Cold War, when one mistake meant death in a Prague alley, and America would disavow your existence without hesitation. If anyone could extract her from this situation alive, it was Colonel Thaddeus Ironhawk Brennan. She checked her watch. 28 minutes until the extraction window opened. 28 minutes to prepare for whatever Wade Driscoll would throw at them. The wait stretched. Elena used the time to review contingencies. Primary extraction here. Secondary LZ 3 miles north if this location was compromised. Tertiary escape routes through the western ridge if both LZs became untenable. Always have a backup. Always have a way out. Brennan's lessons drilled until they became reflex. Then she heard it. Not the aggressive thump of a military Blackhawk, but something older. The distinctive whop, whop, whop of a Huey helicopter. The sound of Vietnam. The sound of the Gulf War. The sound of history refusing to die quietly. The helicopter appeared over the northern ridge, olive drab paint, weathered but maintained. No military markings. Nothing to trace it back to official channels. It descended into the bowl with practiced precision, the pilot understanding mountain thermals, the way a sailor understood tides. The skids touched ground. The side door slid open. 6 men emerged moving with coordinated efficiency that spoke of decades working together. All between 64 and 69 years old. All veterans of wars most Americans had forgotten. All still lethal. And leading them, Colonel Thaddeus Brennan. 67 years old. Gray hair cropped military short. Face mapped with lines, earned through weather and combat and worry. But his eyes remained ageless, sharp, assessing missing nothing. They swept the terrain, evaluated the defensive positions, and found Elena in under 3 seconds. He crossed to her in long strides. Elena tried to stand at attention despite her injuries. Her left arm was immobilized in the sling. Her ribs protested. Her knee threatened to buckle. Brennan reached her and stopped. For a long moment, he simply looked at her, his expression unreadable. Then his weathered face cracked slightly, not quite a smile, but close. 8,000 feet, he said. His voice was rough, thickened with emotion he wasn't quite hiding. You fell 8,000 feet and walked 14 miles with a broken body. You taught me the physics. I just applied them. I taught you theory from a textbook. You did the impossible in real time. Then, breaking decades of military protocol and professional distance, Brennan pulled her into a careful embrace, mindful of her injuries but unable to stop himself. It lasted 3 seconds, long enough to convey everything that words couldn't touch. When he stepped back, his eyes were wet. He didn't bother hiding it. Your father, Brennan said quietly. Danny Blackwood. He's looking down right now, prouder than any man has a right to be. You know that, right? Elena's own throat tightened. I had good teachers. Him first, you second. You had a great father and decent training. Everything else was you, Reaper. All you. Brennan turned to address his team. 6 veterans who'd seen combat across 3 decades. Men who'd earned their retirement but had come anyway when one of their own needed extraction. Gentlemen, Brennan said, voice carrying command, this is Staff Sergeant Elena Blackwood, call sign Reaper. She survived betrayal by fellow soldiers, an 8,000-foot drop without a parachute, and 14 miles of mountain terrain with injuries that should have killed her. She's the reason we're here, and despite what rank might suggest, she's in tactical command of this operation. 6 sets of eyes turned to Elena, assessing without judgment, evaluating without condescension. Professional soldiers recognizing another professional soldier. The oldest of them, a man who looked like weathered leather stretched over granite, gave a slow nod. Sergeant Major Hugh Dalton, 66 years old. Brennan had told her about him, once communications specialist who'd intercepted Soviet transmissions across Eastern Europe during the 80s. Ma'am, Dalton said, you survived that fall using the descent techniques the colonel taught you. Yes, Sergeant Major. Then you've earned the right to give orders. What do you need from us? Elena felt something shift in her chest. These men legends in the special operations community were deferring to her, not because of rank, not because of politics, because of what she'd accomplished, because she'd proven herself in the most fundamental way possible. She straightened despite the pain lancing through her ribs. Tactical brief. We have multiple complications and limited time. They gathered around a map spread across the Huey's cargo floor. Elena outlined the situation with concise precision. Wade Driscoll's Delta Team, General Marcus Holloway's conspiracy, the original extraction point that was likely compromised, Garrett Kane's warning, and the alternate location they now occupied. Brennan said, his tone unreadable. Garrett Kane, I served with him in the Gulf War. Good soldier before he went sideways. You trust him? I don't trust anyone who works for the people trying to kill me, Elena replied. But his tactical information is sound. This location offers better defensive advantages than the original coordinates. Whether he meant to help us or trap us, we're better positioned here. Smart. Brennan traced routes on the map. What's your operational plan? Elena laid it out. Wade believes I'm dead. When his search teams don't find a body, he'll expand the search grid. Eventually, he'll realize someone fed him bad information. When that happens, he'll come looking. And I want to be ready with something better than a firefight. Which is evidence, recorded confession. We already have Wade's admission from the helicopter. But we need more. We need General Holloway himself admitting conspiracy. We need documentation that can't be buried or explained away. We need to end this completely. Chief Warrant Officer Jack Stone spoke up. 68 years old, the Huey pilot with the weathered face of a man who'd flown through every kind of hell. You're talking about using yourself as bait again. You can barely stand. I can function well enough for what's needed. Function and survive are two different things. Then we make sure survival is part of the plan. Elena met his eyes. I didn't fall 8,000 feet just to get shot in an ambush. I've got work to do, starting with ending Holloway's network. Brennan studied her for a long moment, then nodded. It's your Operation Reaper. Tell us what you need. Elena outlined her plan. It was audacious, high risk, exactly the kind of operation that got soldiers killed when it went wrong. But it was also the only way to end this decisively and provide evidence that couldn't be disputed. The team listened, asked tactical questions, offered modifications based on decades of operational experience. By the time they'd finished, the plan had evolved into something even more dangerous but significantly more likely to succeed. One problem, Dalton said, his comm specialist brain working through scenarios. We need Wade to come to a specific location. How do we guarantee that? Elena pulled out her modified radio, the one Tyler Chen had given her weeks ago, the one with the built-in recorder and emergency beacon broadcasting on obsolete Cold War frequencies. Wade knows about Brennan, Elena said. He knows about the Cold War operational protocols. If he's monitoring these frequencies and he'd be tactically incompetent not to, he'll hear this. She keyed the radio, spoke clearly into the microphone. Ironhawk, this is Phoenix. Extraction complete. Evidence secured. Returning to base for immediate debrief with Inspector General. Phoenix out. She switched off the transmitter. Stone frowned. He'll know it's bait. He'll suspect it might be bait. But he can't afford not to investigate. If I'm alive, if I have evidence, he's finished. His career is over. He faces court-martial and Leavenworth. He has to eliminate the threat or accept destruction. And you're betting he'll choose confrontation. I'm betting his ego won't let him do anything else. Men like Wade don't run. They double down. Brennan almost smiled. You think like a tactician, like someone I trained. I learned from the best. Damn right you did. He turned to his team. All right, it's Reaper's operation. We're support. Load up. We've got a conspiracy to end. They were preparing to move when they heard the vehicle engine. Weapons came up instantly. Defensive positions. Fields of fire established. But Elena raised her hand. Hold fire. I recognize that engine signature. A battered pickup truck emerged from the tree line. Civilian vehicle, local plates moving slowly with hands visible through the windshield. Non-threatening approach. It stopped 50 yards out. The driver's door opened. Lieutenant Wyatt Mercer stepped out with his hands raised high. He wore civilian clothes instead of tactical gear. Unarmed as far as Elena could see. Alone. Staff Sergeant Blackwood, his voice carried across the distance. Young, uncertain, but determined. I need to talk to you. I have evidence. Please don't shoot me. Elena glanced at Brennan, the youngest member of Wade's Delta team. He was there when they threw me out, watched it happen, and did nothing. Brennan's hand drifted toward his sidearm. Want me to handle this? Let's hear what he has to say first. We can always shoot him later if necessary. That's my girl, pragmatic. They waited as Mercer approached slowly. Every movement was careful, deliberate, non-threatening. When he reached 10 feet, Elena spoke. Stop there, Lieutenant. State your purpose. Mercer stopped. He looked young and frightened and resolved. I was part of Captain Driscoll's team. I watched them cut your harness. Watched them push you out at 8,000 feet. I didn't stop them. I should have. I didn't. I'm here to make that right. How? By testifying, by providing evidence. He slowly reached into his jacket, pulled out his phone, held it up. I documented everything. Photos of the cut harness, Wade's knife with fabric fibers still on the blade, text messages between Wade and General Holloway discussing the operation, encrypted communications, but I have the decryption keys. Why? The single word hung in the cold air. Mercer's jaw worked. Because I took an oath when I joined the Army. I swore to support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. I broke that oath when I stayed silent and watched them commit murder. I'm trying to honor it now, even if it's too late. Elena studied him, saw genuine remorse, saw a young soldier who'd made a catastrophic mistake and was desperately trying to atone. She'd seen enough liars in her career to recognize truth when it appeared. You watched them throw me out of a helicopter and did nothing, she said, each word deliberate. Yes, ma'am, I did. I was a coward. I can't change that. I can't take it back. But I can help you stop them from doing it to anyone else. Brennan moved beside Elena. Could be a setup. Could be Wade's play to get close. Could be. Or it could be exactly what it looks like, a conscience that finally woke up. Elena looked at Mercer. Lieutenant, you understand that if you're lying to me, I will kill you myself. No hesitation, no second chance. Yes, ma'am, I understand. And you understand your testimony will end your military career, that you'll face charges for conspiracy to commit murder, that you're throwing away everything you've worked for. Yes, ma'am, I understand that too, but at least I'll be able to look in the mirror again. At least I'll be able to sleep without seeing you fall every time I close my eyes. Elena made her decision. Come forward, slowly. Colonel, if he moves wrong, drop him. Gladly. Mercer approached with exaggerated care, handed over his phone. Elena scrolled through the evidence while Brennan covered him. Photos, detailed, well-lit photos of the cut harness straps, close-ups of Wade's tactical knife with visible fabric fibers, screenshots of encrypted text messages between Wade and General Holloway discussing the Blackwood problem and permanent solutions, a recording of a conversation discussing payment on schedules. It was comprehensive, damning, exactly what they needed to make the case airtight. Why come now? Elena asked, still studying the phone. Because I heard your radio transmission 30 minutes ago. I knew it was bait, knew Wade would take it, and I couldn't, his voice caught. I couldn't let him kill anyone else, not when I could stop it this time. Not when I could do the right thing, even though it's too late for you to trust me. Elena looked at Brennan. He examined the evidence on the phone and gave a small nod. It was real. Mercer's remorse appeared genuine. They could use him. All right, Lieutenant, you're on our side now. That means you follow my orders without question or hesitation. Understood. Understood, ma'am. Good, because I'm about to ask you to do something that will either get us all killed or end this conspiracy forever. She handed back his phone. You up for it? Mercer's jaw set with determination. Tell me what you need. The abandoned Cold War missile silo designated Site 7 had been constructed in 1962 during the Cuban Missile Crisis when nuclear annihilation seemed not just possible but likely. It had housed a Minuteman II intercontinental ballistic missile capable of delivering a 1.2 megaton warhead to Moscow in 33 minutes. The missile had been removed in '91 after the Soviet Union's collapse, The silo had been officially decommissioned, sealed, supposedly forgotten, but someone had reopened it, turned it into something else. A weapons cache worth millions. Soviet-era arms that had flooded into American black markets after the Cold War ended. AK-47 variants, Makarov pistols, RPG-7 rocket launchers, possibly even man-pads, man-portable air defense systems capable of bringing down civilian aircraft. The perfect location for a final confrontation. Elena stood at the entrance to the silo as afternoon shadows lengthened across the Montana wilderness. Her body protested every movement, but she'd moved past listening to pain signals. There was work to do, justice to serve, an oath to honor. The silo entrance was massive concrete half buried in the mountainside. Blast doors stood open, revealing steps descending into darkness. Brennan's team had spent 3 hours rigging it with recording equipment, cameras hidden in structural crevices, microphones wired into the ventilation system, all broadcasting to multiple secure servers that General Holloway's people couldn't access or destroy. Whatever happened here would be documented, preserved, evidence that couldn't be erased. Elena checked her weapons methodically. M4 carbine with 3 spare magazines, sidearm with 2 spares, tactical knife. She was operating at maybe 60% capacity due to her injuries, but 60% of a Ranger was still more dangerous than most soldiers at full strength. Brennan approached. He'd aged visibly over the past 48 hours. The stress of coordinating an off-books operation, the fear of losing another soldier he cared about. He'd lost Danny Blackwood in 2012. The prospect of losing Danny's daughter was almost more than he could bear. "You don't have to be the bait," he said quietly. "We can modify the plan. Use Mercer or one of my team." "No, it has to be me. Wade needs to see me alive. Needs to process that I survived. That emotional reaction will make him sloppy, make him say things he otherwise wouldn't." "You're betting a lot on his psychology. You taught me that 90% of combat is psychological. The other 10% is just implementation. I taught you that preparation is 90% and execution is 10%. Same concept, different emphasis." Elena adjusted her sling, testing her range of motion. Limited but functional. "Besides, this is personal for Wade now. I'm the woman who survived what should have killed me. That's going to eat at him. Make him need to finish what he started." Brennan's hand gripped her shoulder. Firm, steady. "Lena, if this goes wrong, if the situation deteriorates beyond recovery, you run. You don't play hero, you survive. That's a direct order." "With respect, Colonel, I'm in tactical command of this operation. I give the orders." "Then give yourself that order. Promise me." Elena met his eyes, saw the fear there, the barely controlled terror of a man who'd already buried too many people he loved. Danny Blackwood, his own daughter lost to a drunk driver decades ago. He couldn't survive losing Elena too. "I promise," she said, "if it goes sideways, I'll extract. I'll survive. Because that's what you trained me to do. Because that's what your father would demand." "That too." Brennan pulled something from his pocket, a compass, brass worn smooth by decades of handling. The same compass he'd given her during Ranger School. The one she'd carried during her 14-mile trek through the wilderness after the fall. "Your father carried this during the Gulf War," Brennan said. "I gave it to him before his first deployment. Told him it would always point him home. When he died, it came back to me. I gave it to you at Fort Benning. Now I'm giving it to you again." He pressed it into her tendon. "For luck, for remembrance, for everything that matters." Elena closed her fingers around the compass. The brass was warm from Brennan's hand. She could feel engravings worn almost smooth. Her father's initials, the date of his first deployment. "Thank you, Hawk. Don't thank me. Just come back alive. That's all the thanks I need." The radio crackled, Dalton's voice. "Iron Hawk watchdog. Multiple vehicles approaching from south-southwest. 4 SUVs. Estimate 15 to 20 personnel. ETA 12 minutes. Brennan keyed his mic. "Copy watchdog. All stations weapons hold. Let them come. Phoenix, you ready?" Elena activated her throat mic. "Ready. Let them come." She descended into the silo, down concrete steps that decades of moisture had made treacherous. into darkness that smelled like rust and stale air and old fear. At the bottom, a vast chamber opened up. The missile had stood here once 60 feet of nuclear death pointed at the sky, ready to end the world at a moment's notice. Now it was empty except for wooden crates of weapons in the shadows where Brennan's team waited. Elena positioned herself in the center of the chamber, visible, apparently vulnerable, the perfect bait. Above, she heard vehicle doors slamming, voices issuing tactical commands, the sound of a team preparing for contact. Wade's team, coming to finish what they'd started. Time stretched, each second felt elastic. Elena controlled her breathing, managed her heart rate, became still inside the way Brennan had taught her. Combat calm, ranger discipline. Footsteps on the stairs. Descending, multiple personnel moving with tactical precision. Captain Wade Driscoll entered the chamber with his weapon raised and violence in his eyes. 3 Delta Force operators flanked him, moving in practice formation. All heavily armed, all professionals, all here to commit murder and call it operational security. They stopped when they saw Elena. She stood in the center of the chamber, leaning against a crate as if she needed the support. Her left arm was in its sling, bandages visible under her tactical jacket. She looked exactly like what she was, a soldier who'd survived something impossible and was running on determination and spite. Wade stared at her, his mind visibly processing, recalculating probabilities, coming to terms with an impossibility that refused to stay impossible. "You're supposed to be dead," he said finally. His voice was flat, empty of everything except disbelief. "Funny thing about 8,000-foot falls," Elena replied. "Sometimes people survive them when they have been trained properly. That's not possible. No one survives that. And yet here I am, breathing, unarmed. Really inconvenient for you, I imagine." Wade's weapon came up, aimed at her center mass. His finger was on the trigger. "Not for long. Before you shoot, Captain, you should know this entire chamber is wired for recording. Video, audio, multiple redundant systems broadcasting to secure servers outside your reach. You shoot me now, it's premeditated murder on camera. No way to spin that as anything else." Wade hesitated. "You're bluffing. Am I? You want to bet your life on that assumption? Because I already bet mine. And somehow I'm still here." One of Wade's Delta operators shifted nervously. "Captain, she's alone, no visible backup. We can take her." "She's never alone," Wade said. "That's the problem. That's always been the problem. Where's Brennan Blackwood? Where's the old guard you called in, around, watching, waiting to see what you do next, collecting evidence?" Elena kept her voice conversational. "You've got a choice to make, Wade. Cut your losses now or dig yourself deeper." "I don't have any losses. You've got nothing, no case, no evidence that would hold up. Just your word against mine. And I'm a decorated Delta Force captain. You're a staff sergeant with a history of insubordination." Elena smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression. "Actually, I have your confession. Remember the helicopter when you told me about General Holloway's network, about the $68 million I cost him, about the controlled weapons flow and permanent military funding? I recorded all of it. Every word." Wade's face drained of color. That's not legally admissible. Maybe not in a court-martial, but the Inspector General doesn't care about legal admissibility. Neither does the Senate Intelligence Committee. Neither do the journalists who'll receive copies if anything happens to me." She paused. "You're done, Wade. You just don't know it yet." The standoff held, Wade calculating options. Elena watching him calculate, both of them understanding that the next few seconds would determine everything. Then the silo entrance echoed with new footsteps, heavier, more measured, the sound of authority arriving. General Marcus Holloway entered the chamber. He was 62 years old and looked like everything a general should be. Silver hair perfectly styled, strong jawline, dress uniform with enough ribbons and medals to outfit a recruiting poster. He'd spent 34 years climbing the military hierarchy, building influence, creating networks of power and profit. He wasn't about to let one stubborn ranger destroy what he'd built. "Staff Sergeant Blackwood," Holloway said. His voice was smooth, cultured, the voice of a man accustomed to being obeyed without question. You are considerably more resilient than Captain Driscoll led me to believe. General Holloway, good of you to come personally. Most conspirators send proxies. I wanted to see the woman who survived the impossible. 8,000 feet without a parachute. Quite remarkable. You must share your secret. Good training, Cold War techniques, physics, and a refusal to die on someone else's schedule. Holloway's smile was thin and cold. Thaddeus Brennan's student. Yes, I served with him briefly during Desert Storm. Competent officer, too idealistic for the realities of modern military operations, too bound by outdated concepts of honor. Concepts like following your oath, supporting and defending the Constitution. The oath is a tool, Sergeant. Like any tool, it serves those who understand how to wield it properly. I've spent 3 decades learning to use it effectively. You mean corrupting it for profit? I mean understanding that modern warfare is fundamentally economic. Defense is business. Business requires pragmatic approaches. Approaches that men like Brennan can't comprehend because they're trapped in 20th century thinking. Wade shifted uncomfortably. Elena noticed. Holloway noticed too. Captain Driscoll, Holloway said without looking at him, you failed to complete your assignment. Staff Sergeant Blackwood is alive, standing here, threatening our entire operation. That's unacceptable. Sir, no excuses. You had one task, eliminate the problem. You failed catastrophically. You can still, what? She's recorded our conversation already. She has evidence. She has testimony. You've made this situation exponentially worse through your incompetence. Wade's face flushed with anger and humiliation. Then what do you want me to do? General Holloway pulled his sidearm in one smooth motion, turned, shot Wade once in the upper chest. The sound was massive in the concrete chamber. Wade staggered, hand going to the wound below his collarbone. Blood spread across his tactical vest. His eyes went wide with shock and betrayal. I want you to stop being a liability, Holloway said calmly. Wade collapsed to his knees, blood pumping between his fingers. His weapon clattered to the concrete. The other Delta operators froze, uncertain who the enemy was anymore. Elena didn't move. Kept her M4 ready, but not threatening. Waited. Let the situation develop. Wade's hand fumbled at his tactical vest, pulled out a flash drive from an inner pocket. He held it up weakly, blood streaming from his mouth. Take it, Wade whispered. His voice was wet, failing. Everything. Holloway's network. 5 more conspirators. Elena moved, fast despite her injuries. Knelt beside Wade but kept her weapon ready and her eyes on Holloway. Why now? She asked quietly. Wade's eyes found hers, already glazing. You earned it. Real Ranger. Not me. Never me. His hand fell. Eyes lost focus. Wade Driscoll died with Elena Blackwood holding the evidence that would destroy the conspiracy he'd served. Elena stood slowly, pocketed the flash drive, raised her M4 to a ready position. General Holloway, you're under arrest for murder, treason, conspiracy, and violations of the Uniform Code of Military Justice. Drop your weapon. Holloway actually laughed. You arrest me. You're a wounded staff sergeant with a broken body. I'm a general with armed backup and 30 years of connections. How exactly do you plan to arrest me? Like this. The silo erupted with tactical lights from 6 positions. Brennan's team emerging from concealment, all with clear shots at Holloway and his remaining operators. And from the entrance, above, more voices. Official voices. Federal Bureau of Investigation, weapons down, hands, visible now. FBI agents poured down the stairs. Inspector General investigators followed. Brennan had called them hours ago. They'd been staged nearby, listening, recording everything on independent equipment. Holloway's weapon wavered. He looked around the chamber, seeing his empire collapsing in real time. You can't do this, he said. I have connections. Senators, defense contractors, federal judges. Had Elena corrected, past tense, you had connections. Before you murdered Captain Driscoll in front of federal witnesses. Before you confessed to conspiracy on camera. Before you forgot that some people still take the oath seriously. An FBI agent moved forward. General Marcus Holloway, you are under arrest. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. Holloway's sidearm suddenly swung toward Elena. One last desperate act. One final attempt to eliminate the woman who'd destroyed everything he'd built. Elena was faster. Her M4 barked once. The round took Holloway in the right shoulder, spinning him around. His weapon clattered across the concrete floor. Elena closed the distance, despite the pain screaming through her injuries. Kicked the weapon away. Grabbed Holloway's wounded arm and twisted it behind his back. Her broken collarbone sent white-hot agony through her shoulder. She ignored it completely. "You're finished, General, and I made absolutely certain of it." FBI agents swarmed forward, secured Holloway with zip ties, read him his rights again, led him toward the stairs in daylight and justice. As they passed, Elena Holloway looked at her. "You've made powerful enemies, Sergeant. This isn't over." Elena met his eyes without flinching. "I survived an 8,000-foot fall without a parachute. Your enemies don't frighten me." Holloway was taken away. The remaining Delta operators surrendered without resistance. The chamber slowly emptied of everyone except Elena and Brennan's team. Elena stood in the center of the silo, swaying slightly. The adrenaline was fading. The pain was returning with devastating force. Her vision grayed at the edges. Brennan appeared at her side. His hand gripped her uninjured shoulder, steadying her. "You did it," he said quietly. "It's over." "Not quite. Still need to process all the evidence. Testify before Senate committees. Make sure every single corrupt officer in that network faces justice. That comes later. Right now, you need medical attention. Right now, I need to know this mattered, that my father's oath still means something, that the system can still be fixed when people fight for it." Brennan's other hand came up to frame her face, forced her to meet his eyes. "It means everything, and you just proved it. The oath remains because warriors like you keep it sacred. Your father would be so damn proud right now. I'm so damn proud." Elena allowed herself to lean on him. Just for a moment. Just long enough to acknowledge that she wasn't alone. Had never been alone. The old guard, the true believers, the ones who remembered that honor wasn't just a word in a manual, but a way of living. "Let's go home, Hawk," she said. "Roger that, Reaper. Let's go home." The 3 weeks following General Holloway's arrest passed in a relentless blur of federal investigators, testimony sessions, and evidence documentation. Elena spent 12-hour days in secure facilities, walking prosecutors through every detail. The recorded confessions. Wade's flash drive revealing 5 additional conspirators, 2 Pentagon officials, 1 CIA officer, 2 defense contractors. Lieutenant Mercer's photographic evidence. The financial trails that stretch back 7 years and touch dozens of military and civilian personnel. She watched as the conspiracy unraveled thread by thread. Arrests made quietly in pre-dawn raids. Charges filed under seal. The media didn't know yet. Wouldn't know until the cases were airtight and the defendants were in custody. Her body healed incrementally. Physical therapy sessions for the torn ACL. The broken collarbone knitting back together under surgical pins. The ribs losing their constant edge of pain. She could move without crutches now. Could function almost normally. Almost. The nightmares were harder to treat than the physical injuries. She fell every night in her dreams. 8,000 feet of empty air. The wind screaming, the ground rushing up. Sometimes she woke before impact. Sometimes she didn't. Brennan told her the dreams would fade eventually. She wasn't sure she believed him. 3 weeks after Holloway's arrest, Elena stood in a secure Pentagon briefing room. Small, windowless. Just her, Brennan, and a handful of senior military and civilian officials cleared to know the full scope of the investigation. The Secretary of Defense stood at the head of the table. 64 years old, career military before civilian appointment. The kind of man who'd come up through the enlisted ranks before officer training. He understood what it meant to carry a rifle before you carried rank. "General Marcus Holloway has been formally charged with 19 federal counts," the secretary said. "Treason, conspiracy to commit murder, illegal weapons trafficking, corruption of military assets. 22 other officers have been arrested, including the 5 additional conspirators identified in Captain Driscoll's files. 8 defense contractors, 3 CIA officials. The investigation continues to expand." He paused, looked at Elena with an expression that mixed respect and something like awe. Staff Sergeant Blackwood, your actions have exposed the most significant military corruption case in half a century. You survived an assassination attempt that should have been fatal. You gathered evidence while critically injured. You executed a tactical operation that resulted in the arrest of conspirators at the highest levels of command. I did my duty, sir. Nothing more. You did considerably more than duty requires. You upheld your oath when others broke theirs. That matters. A Navy admiral spoke up. 3 stars, career submariner who'd commanded ballistic missile submarines during the Cold War. Staff Sergeant, we're recommending you for the Soldier's Medal. Highest peacetime valor award we can offer. The ceremony will be classified for security reasons, but you've earned it beyond question. Elena nodded. Her throat was too tight to speak. Another official stood, Army Colonel from the Inspector General's office. We also need to address Lieutenant Wyatt Mercer's situation. His testimony has been crucial. He provided evidence and testified truthfully about his own involvement. We're recommending honorable discharge rather than court-martial. He'll face no criminal charges. He made the right choice eventually, Elena said. That should count for something. It does, and it will. The meeting continued for another 90 minutes. Details about ongoing investigations, questions about future testimony, discussions of security protocols and witness protection considerations. Finally, it ended. A smaller ceremony took place in an adjacent room. Just Elena Brennan, the Secretary of Defense, and 2 witnesses required by military protocol. The Secretary held a small case containing the Soldier's Medal, bronze and ribbons. It felt heavier than it should when he pinned it to her dress uniform. Your father earned the Bronze Star in Desert Storm, the Secretary said quietly. You've earned something rarer. The knowledge that honor still exists, that the oath is still sacred, that one person can still make a difference. Thank you, sir. Brennan stepped forward. His eyes were bright. May I, Mr. Secretary? The Secretary nodded and stepped back. Brennan looked at Elena, really looked at her, seeing not just the soldier but the girl who'd stood in Arlington Rain 12 years ago and sworn to honor her father's legacy. Danny Blackwood was the finest soldier I ever trained, Brennan said. His voice was rough with emotion. He wasn't hiding anymore. Until I met his daughter. You've exceeded every expectation, Reaper. You've proven that skills matter, but character matters more. You've made your father proud. You've made me proud. You've reminded all of us why we serve. Elena's vision blurred. She blinked hard but couldn't stop the tears. Thank you, Hawk, for everything, for training me, for believing in me, for coming when I needed you. Always Reaper. That's what family does. The Secretary cleared his throat diplomatically. Staff Sergeant Blackwood, we have one more matter to discuss. A proposal. Elena wiped her eyes, straightened. Sir, we're establishing a new task force, Internal Integrity Operations, oversight of military corruption and internal threats, reporting directly to Joint Special Operations Command with civilian oversight from the Inspector General. The mission is to identify and eliminate threats like Holloway before they can metastasize. Elena listened, feeling pieces fall into place. The task force needs a commander. Someone who's proven they can't be corrupted, intimidated, or killed by conventional means. Someone who understands that the oath is more than words. You want me to lead it? We do. Colonel Brennan has agreed to serve as senior advisor. You'll have resources, authority, and mandate to protect the institution from internal rot. Elena looked at Brennan. He gave a small nod of encouragement. Sir, I'm 27 years old, a staff sergeant, leading a task force of this scope. Age is irrelevant. Rank is administrative. Competence and integrity are what matter. You've demonstrated both beyond any possible doubt. Elena thought about her father, about the oath she'd sworn, about falling 8,000 feet and choosing to survive. I have one condition, sir. Name it. We do this absolutely correctly. No politics, no expedience, no bending rules to catch rule breakers. We uphold the oath completely. Every word, every principle. That's non-negotiable. The Secretary smiled, actually smiled. Agreed. Those are exactly the terms we want. When can you start? After I pay my respects, sir. There's someone I need to visit first. Arlington National Cemetery was quiet in the morning light. Rows of white headstones marched toward the horizon in perfect alignment. Each stone was a story. Each story was a sacrifice. Elena found her father's grave easily. She'd memorized the path years ago. Master Sergeant Daniel Blackwood, 1975-2012, killed in action. The details remained classified, would always remain classified. Some secrets died with the men who carried them. Elena stood before the headstone wearing dress uniform. The soldier's medal gleamed on her chest. Brennan's compass was in her pocket. Wade's flash drive had been entered into evidence. Holloway was in federal custody awaiting trial. Justice imperfect but real was being served. She placed her ranger tab on the headstone, placed the metal case beside it, knelt despite the protest from her healing knee. "Dad," she said quietly, "I did it. Prove them all wrong. Survive what they said would kill me. Expose corruption at the highest levels. And now I'm going to keep doing it. Keep protecting the oath you died for. Keep honoring everything you taught me." The wind moved through the trees. Birds sang. Life continued around the markers of death as it always had and always would. Footsteps approached. She knew without looking it was Brennan. He stood beside her. Together, they saluted her father's grave. "Danny's watching," Brennan said after a moment, "building a hell of a legacy reaper, one that would make any father proud." "Our legacy," Elena corrected. "Yours, his, mine. We pass it forward. That's how it works. That's how it survives. Then let's make damn sure we pass it forward properly. To people who'll carry it with honor." They stood in silence for a long moment. Two warriors from different generations bound by the same values and the same oath. Finally, Elena stood. "Ready, Hawk." "For what?" "To start the real work. Build the task force. Train the next generation. Make sure no more Holloways poison what we protect." "Been ready my whole life. Let's move out." They walked together through Arlington, past thousands of graves, past generations of service and sacrifice, past the accumulated weight of history that demanded honor in return. At the cemetery gates, Elena paused, turned back one last time toward her father's headstone. "I'll be back," she said quietly, "with good news. Always with good news." Then she turned forward, toward the future, toward the work that remained. An official car waited to take them to their next assignment, their new mission, the beginning of something that would matter. 6 months later, Elena stood on a mountain peak in Montana, the same mountains where she'd fallen, where she'd survived, where she'd been remade. Below, a training class of 15 Ranger candidates worked through Cold War survival exercises, the first class of the new Integrity Operations Program. Men and women, all volunteers, all committed to upholding the oath even when it cost them everything. Elena watched them with the eyes of someone who'd been tested past breaking and hadn't broken. She saw their potential, saw their determination, saw the future. Brennan stood beside her, 77 years old now, still sharp, still dangerous, still teaching. "They're solid," he said. "Not as good as you were, but solid. They'll get better, we'll make certain of it. Using the old methods, the methods that work, skills and character, fundamentals and discipline, the things that don't change regardless of technology." Far below, the Huey helicopter sat on a landing pad, the same aircraft that had extracted her 6 months ago. Now it served as training equipment and reminder that sometimes the old tools were still the best tools. Elena's radio crackled. "Phoenix, this is base. You have urgent traffic from Washington." She keyed her mic. "Copy, nature of traffic. New integrity investigation, potential corruption in European command. They're requesting your personal oversight. High priority." Elena looked at Brennan. He shrugged. "Your call, Reaper. You're the commander. Tell Washington we'll be there in 10 hours. Phoenix out." She turned to head down the mountain. Brennan followed. "You ever get tired?" he asked. "The constant missions, the vigilance." Elena thought about her father, about the oath, about choosing to survive so she could continue fighting. "No," she said, "because every fight protects something worth protecting. The oath, the honor, the idea that we can be better than our worst impulses. That matters. That's a heavy burden. Good thing I don't carry it alone." They reached the Huey. The pilot had already completed pre-flight checks. The rotors began their familiar rhythm. Elena climbed aboard, looked back at the mountains one final time. The place where she'd fallen and risen, where she'd been broken and remade into something stronger. The helicopter lifted off, banking south toward Washington in the next mission. As they climbed above the peaks, Elena pulled out Brennan's compass, the one her father had carried in Desert Storm, the one that always pointed home. The needle held steady. True north. Always had, always would. She closed her eyes, let the rotor noise wash over her like absolution. They'd said she couldn't survive Ranger School. She did. They'd said she couldn't lead combat operations. She led 13 successful missions. They'd said she couldn't survive 8,000 feet without a parachute. But they'd forgotten something crucial. They'd forgotten that Elena Blackwood was her father's daughter. Thaddeus Brennan's student, a warrior who understood that the oath wasn't poetry, it was a way of life. The helicopter flew on through blue Montana sky, carrying 2 generations of warriors toward the next fight, carrying the old values forward into an uncertain future. The oath remained, the watch continued, and the Phoenix, risen from her 8,000-foot fall, would make sure it stayed that way. Forever.